Hey, Calvin here, and this is the Logitech K780 wireless Bluetooth keyboard, and it is a very solid keyboard. I really like this keyboard. I've used this keyboard for a few years now, and I've used it across multiple devices. It can pair with your computers, your tablets, your phones. The design is really cool. It's a solid build quality. There's a lot of cool features about this keyboard. Now, there are some things that are questionable and things that I wish Logitech would have done differently or sort of improved, but the vast majority of the things that this keyboard does, it does very well. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the design of this keyboard. This is a really modern looking keyboard, even though it's been out for a number of years. It's got this really nice dark charcoal gray color to it. It's got rounded keys. It's got this white sort of base outline around the frame of the keyboard. And the build quality is really good. Now, it is a little bit hefty, however, it is very portable. So if you want to throw this in your backpack and go to a cafe or a library or just someplace else to work, it is very doable. I've done it before, but there is a little bit of heft to it. It's not as portable as something like the Magic Keyboard for the iPad or even some of the more thinner and more lightweight keyboards that Logitech offers, but it is very transportable. Now, the color scheme for this keyboard is very modern and it goes with a lot of different setups. So most of the colors on here are really twofold. It's got this dark charcoal gray color and it's got this white material for the holder and sort of for the edges of the keyboard on the bottom, and it goes very well with a lot of different types of desk setup. So I have this white desk with this charcoal mat, and I think it looks very nice here. Now, the actual keyboard part of this keyboard, some people have asked if this is detachable, and it is not. So this white base and this keyboard piece are all one piece. You cannot detach this keyboard and separate the holder. I wish you could. I think that would be a pretty cool feature, but unfortunately it's just all one piece. But again, still very portable, still very lightweight. Now, you'll notice that the keys on this keyboard are rounded. They're circular. So most of the letters and the numbers have a circular cutout for the keycap, and all of the circular keys have a slight indentation to them. So it's a little bit more satisfying when you start typing on this keyboard. Your finger sort of just naturally falls into the center of each key, which is really nice. It provides for a more comfortable and smooth typing experience. Now, some of the keys, like the function row, the arrow keys, and the space bar, they are still rounded, but they, instead of having an indentation, they're a bit raised and curved at the top. But overall, the design of this keyboard is super cool. I really like the colors, I really like the keys, and I'll get to the keys in a minute. I think they are one of the best features about this keyboard, but overall, design is really nice. Okay, so let's talk about some of the tech specs. So this is a wireless Bluetooth keyboard. It can pair with Mac or with Windows, and it does have keys and lettering on some of the keys that are specific to either Mac OS or Windows. Now, the keyboard itself comes with this little unifying Logitech dongle that you can plug into a USB-C port and use the keyboard that way. Now, this keyboard is a Bluetooth keyboard, so you can very easily pair it with your computer or your tablet or your phones. It's got 3 device switching keys at the very top, and the pairing process is very easy. You just hold down one of the keys until the light starts blinking, start the pairing process with your device, and then your device will tell you which key code to enter on the keyboard. Press enter and it is paired. And so with this keyboard, you can pair up to 3 different devices, and you can very easily switch between them just by pressing either 1, 2, or 3. And the whole process works pretty flawlessly. Sometimes, very rarely, you'll have to tap the keyboard maybe once or twice to enable the Bluetooth on certain devices, but for the most part, switching between devices is very seamless. It's really convenient, and it's very helpful if you do have maybe a desktop setup, but you're also working on your tablet, or you want to respond to some messages on your phone. Okay, unfortunately, this keyboard is not rechargeable, so it does not have a built-in battery where you can just plug in a cable and charge the keyboard up. It does take batteries. It takes 2 AAA batteries. Now, Logitech claims that the battery life on this thing is a whopping 18 months, which is pretty incredible. So for a lot of people, you might just not mind having to replace batteries here every year and a half or so. Obviously, your mileage will vary, and that depends on your workflow. So if you use it quite a bit, you're going to fall short of the 18 months. If you use it casually, you can probably meet the 18 months or even exceed it. So not a big deal, but I do wish it was rechargeable just because all of my other devices are, and it's just very easy to plug in a cable. Even if that meant the battery life would only be 6 months compared to 18 months. I don't mind just plugging this in, letting it charge for an hour or two, and then being good to go. Okay, let's talk about the typing experience on this keyboard. Now, the typing experience on this keyboard is very pleasant. I really enjoy typing on this keyboard. Now, the keys themselves are clicky, but they're a bit muted, so they don't make as much sound as something like the Apple Magic Keyboard, where it's very, very clicky, or of course a mechanical keyboard where those clicks are pretty loud. Now I'll do two quick sound tests, one where the microphone is very close to the keyboard and one where it's about 18 inches away to sort of simulate how far your ears are from the keyboard if it's on a desk. So here's the first test. And here it is again, about 1.5 feet or about 18 inches away from the keyboard. Now, the keys themselves are very satisfying to press down. They have enough travel to make it very satisfying when you're typing on this thing. Now, as I mentioned previously, the keys on this thing are rounded, and I think that is one of this keyboard's best features. Now, I don't know why this is, but when I type on this keyboard, I find myself making less typos. And again, I'm not sure why this is, but I think it's because of the round keys themselves. So when you're typing on a regular keyboard with square keys, you might accidentally hit an adjacent key because your finger might be just a little too close to that key's corners. But on this keyboard, there are no corners on each of the keys. So I noticed that there is bigger gaps between the keys where the corners would be on a standard keyboard. And because of that, when I'm typing really fast, I just notice I make less mistakes on here as compared to something like my Magic Keyboard or my Apple Keyboard. Now, these rounded keys might take some time for people to get used to, especially if you're used to the more square, more traditional keys. But after typing for a few minutes, it becomes natural, and it's just really nice. It's a nice typing experience. Okay, so if you'll see at the very top, there is this function and media key row. Now, in order to use the function keys, you actually have to press down on a function button before you tap on one of those keys. Otherwise, it'll just default to the primary behavior, which might be playing a song or adjusting the volume. Now, if you're using this keyboard with a mobile device, let's say an iPhone or an iPad, yes, the media controls on this thing do work with iOS and most other mobile operating systems. So if you want to switch to your iPad while you're working and adjust the volume there, or pause and play a song, or pretty much do whatever you want on that function key row, it is possible. It works just fine, and I've had no issues with it. Okay, speaking of using mobile devices, let's talk about this thing right here. So this, I'll just call the mobile device gap. So the gap itself is wide enough to host most mobile devices. So an iPad or a similar tablet, an iPhone, an Android phone, most devices fit pretty well into this gap. Now the gap itself, the opening is about 1.2 centimeters from when I measured it this morning, and that is just a tad under half an inch. So I have a iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it has an OtterBox case to it, so it's already pretty thick. And I noticed that it fits fine in the gap. Now, you will notice that the thicker your device, the more vertical it sits in that gap. Whereas if you have something very thin, let's say an iPad without a case, it'll sit a little bit further away from your face at a more wider angle. So as a rule of thumb, the thicker your device overall, the more vertical it will sit on this keyboard. But it's not a big deal. I think it still works fine. It's still far enough back to where you don't have to strain your neck when you're looking at those devices sitting in that gap. Okay, so overall this keyboard is really, really good, and it has a lot of good features. However, there are some questionable things that I wish could be better about this keyboard. Firstly, the batteries. Again, I know I've mentioned this before, but I just wish the battery was rechargeable, and that just saves me from having to buy AAA batteries and keep them and then replace them. And oh gosh, I know that sounds like a first world problem, but I just wish the battery was rechargeable and I could just plug in a USB-C cable and be good to go. Okay, the second thing is I noticed that I do get a little bit of finger fatigue on this keyboard. I think that's just because the keys just have a little bit more resistance to them as compared to something like a Magic Keyboard. I'm just very, very used to very free falling keys when I'm typing, but this keyboard has a little bit more resistance than I'm used to. So if I'm typing for long periods of time, I'll just notice that my fingers tend to get tired quicker. It's nothing that just taking a break doesn't solve, but it's just something I notice. So if you're used to very free falling or low resistance keys, you might have some fatigue on this if you're typing for a very long period of time. Okay, the third thing, these arrow keys are just, they're kind of weird. They're this very slim pill-shaped keys that are not particularly good to use. They just feel a little bit more uncomfortable and not stable. I think the whole profile for these keys are just a lot more narrow than I would have liked, but they are manageable. There's nothing totally wrong about them, but it's just they're just a little weird and annoying to use. Okay, and then the final thing, I wish this thing had backlighting, and maybe that's just because Logitech wanted to conserve some of the battery power that I feel like could have been resolved if it was just a rechargeable battery. But hey, it's not a big deal if you just use it during the daytime. It's totally fine. And yeah, I think backlighting would have just been nice. Okay, so overall, I think this is a really, really good keyboard. There's a lot of really cool things about this keyboard. It's a very modern design that has lasted the test of time. I love the fact that you can have multiple devices in this gap. I love that you can switch between devices very quick. I do like the fact that you can pair this with either Mac OS or with Windows or with most other operating systems. And it's just a very, very solid keyboard. So if you're looking to pick one up, I think you'll be very, very pleased with it, especially if you're just coming from a very basic default keyboard. I think this is going to be a huge upgrade. Now, for all the people that like mechanical keyboards, I don't know if this is going to give you that same satisfaction. I know Logitech has another mechanical keyboard. I have not tried or tested that one. Let me know if that's something you guys would like to see. Maybe I can get my hands on one and try it out. But for the most part, I've enjoyed using this keyboard, and I think you will too. So yeah, I will just end it there. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.